New audio recordings from President Trump months ago suggest he may have known how deadly the coronavirus could be. That's revealed in journalist Bob Woodward's new book, Rage. The Washington Post associate editor conducted 18 interviews with the president over the span of 8 months. In an audio recording from February, the president acknowledges the coronavirus was deadlier than the flu. In another one from March, Mr. Trump admits he publicly downplayed the severity of the virus so as not to, quote, create a panic. Since then, more than 6.3 million people in the U.S. have been infected, and more than 190,000 have died. President Trump lashed out at Woodward's book Wednesday, calling it, quote, just another political hit job. Ben Tracy has more from the White House.
President Trump told Bob Woodward on February 7th, before any known American deaths from the virus, that he knew COVID-19 was airborne and a deadly threat.
You just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
3 weeks later, President Trump told the American people a totally different story.
It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for, and we'll essentially have a flu shot for this in a fairly quick manner.
Then on March 19th, with nearly 200 Americans dead, the president admitted to Woodward in audio obtained by the Washington Post that he deliberately misled the country about the danger.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
Stay calm. It will go away. You know it is going away.
The president knew in early February the virus was highly contagious. But on March 31st, with more than 5,000 Americans dead, he defended himself this way.
I think the one thing nobody really knew about this virus was how contagious it was. It's so incredibly contagious, and nobody knew that.
Today, President Trump claimed he was just being a good leader by not creating fear.
And certainly I'm not going to drive this country or the world into a frenzy. We want to show confidence. We want to show strength. We want to show strength as a nation. And that's what I've done, and we've done very well.
The bombshell book titled Rage, published by Simon & Schuster, a division of Viacom CBS, is based in part on 18 on-the-record interviews the legendary journalist conducted with the president between December and July, apparently recorded with his knowledge. Woodward also writes that Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, called President Trump's leadership rudderless, said his attention span is like a minus number, and his sole purpose is to get reelected. Today, Fauci said he doesn't remember saying any of that.
You should ask others. I don't recall that at all.
And Ben Tracy joins me now from the White House. Ben, CBS's Scott Pelley interviewed Bob Woodward on his book for this week's 60 Minutes. I want to play a quick preview of that for our viewers.
It goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. The touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air. That's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff.
3 weeks after that call, the president said this to the public.
It's a little like the regular flu that we have flu shots for, and we'll essentially have a flu shot for this in a fairly quick manner. Yeah, go ahead.
In that February 7th interview, it's clear that the president knows what the stakes are, but he's not sharing that with the public at that time.
Yes, this is the tragedy. A president of the United States has a duty to warn. The public will understand that, but if they get the feeling that they're not getting the truth, then you're going down the path of deceit and cover-up.
So, Ben, how damaging could this report be for the Trump administration?
This could be very damaging for them, and for a couple of reasons. One, it's the president's own voice on a tape, so they can't really deny it. You hear the president saying it there. And, there's been a lot of criticism about some of the things that President Trump has said about coronavirus, his handling of it. But now we know that he actually knew the seriousness of it behind the scenes, that it wasn't just that he was uninformed. He knew what was happening, and he was saying very different things in public. The other thing is a lot of the polling right now when it comes to the election shows that the top-of-mind issue for most voters orders is coronavirus, and that one of the things the president gets dinged for is his handling of the virus. So this could hit them from a couple different directions.
Well, the president was asked about his admissions to Woodward while delivering remarks on judicial appointments on Wednesday. What was the president's response, and how does it align with the response of others within the administration?
It was kind of an interesting response. The president came out and called it a political hit job, even though it's his own words on the tape, especially when it comes to these issues over the coronavirus. But the president then went on to say that basically he is a cheerleader for the country and that he thinks the hallmarks of a strong leader is to project strength and confidence, and that is what he was doing all along. Now, a lot of people would say that in an instance when you're dealing with a pandemic and life and death issues, your job as a leader is to speak honestly so people can make decisions about their life, so governors can decide what to do in their states. The president says he basically was trying to avoid panic and fear, and that's why he said what he said.
Well, the Washington Post is reporting that Woodward also honed in on the issue of race in America. He pressed the president to, quote, understand the plight of Black Americans. What more can you tell us about this conversation?
Yeah, this was a conversation that happened back in June at the height of some of the Black Lives Matter protests that were happening around the country. And Woodward pressed the president on this issue of white privilege and said, don't you think those of us who grew up with a certain privilege need to do a better job of understanding where some of this emotion is coming from in the experience of Black Americans? And President Trump was very dismissive of it. He actually criticized Woodward. He said, look at you, you've drunk the Kool-Aid. No, I don't feel that way at all, is the exact phrase that the president used to describe his own position.
Meanwhile, the president, as you mentioned, announced a list of 20 potential Supreme Court nominees. Can you tell our viewers a little bit more about the strategy behind this move?
Yeah, that was an interesting event here at the White House. It's almost the kind of event you would have if you were announcing your pick for the Supreme Court, if there was a vacancy on the court. This, however, was the president just unveiling a list of people that he would consider if he does get a second term and there is a vacancy on the court. The reason for this is it's a base strategy. This is to make his base excited about some of the people that could join the Supreme Court. And if President Trump were to get a second term and get more picks on the court, that court would shift decidedly to the right, even more right than it currently is. So this is to give his base something to look at, something to focus on, something that's not about coronavirus or the current state of the economy. This is also something President Trump talks a lot about at his rallies and his campaign events across the country, not only the Supreme Court, but all the other federal judges that he has appointed during his first term.
And the president is reportedly still traveling to Nevada this weekend, Ben, despite reports that his campaign events have been canceled due to coronavirus restrictions. What's the latest on this, and how have both the Trump campaign and local officials responded?
Well, they're on different pages. So the Trump campaign wanted to have these campaign events out west this week, and specifically in Nevada. There was going to be one at an airport in Reno. The president has kind of started doing theirs where he lands Air Force One on a runway somewhere, and there's a hangar, and there's people there kind of half inside, half outside. And they put a big crowd together. They did this last night in North Carolina, and there were very few people wearing masks and really no social distancing. So what the folks in Nevada said probably after seeing that was, you're not going to do that here. That violates the rules that we have in place in the state in terms of mass gatherings and social distancing. The campaign, however, is not deterred. They put out a statement today saying, okay, fine, well, we're still going to come to Nevada, and TBD on what events we will be hosting there this weekend.
All right, Ben Tracy at the White House. Thank you.